Here we are. All right, so let's just get started. I'm kind of a start on time, end on time kind of guy. So thanks for jumping into the Facebook Live. For those of you who are viewing it for the first time, I appreciate that. This is my first time doing a Facebook Live on the laptop, and so I don't really know how everything is structured here. I see that maybe there's a message. Let me see if I can check this out. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Hey, Pete. Thank you for saying yo Pete. Good to see him, man. I was actually just thinking about you today and said, man, I need to get a hold of that guy. We've had too much fun over the years and we haven't seen each other recently. So funny that you would jump on here. So let's get connected. But today, what I want to talk about is this idea of needing the permission to speak. And hey, Amor. All right, thank you. It's something people that don't know me really well are like, you feel like you need permission to speak. It feels like you're talking all the time. But people that know me really well are like, you know what? He's not really. Actually, I am an introvert by nature. If I go to a crowded group of people, I am not going to be the life of that party. In fact, I'm going to be probably hanging out against the wall, wishing I wasn't there. Really, it's one of the big things. You go to a conference. Even when I go to a conference to speak, I'd have to wear the presenter thing, so I knew people were going to talk to me. But I did not want to do any of the mixers. I didn't want to do any of the welcome stuff because I just hate those big group sort of things. And so I used to just think it was being an introvert that caused those things. But over the years, what I found is that I have a sort of personality that needs the permission to speak. And I'm wondering if any of you guys have encountered this or if you know people that are like this. And I think even if this isn't you, I think it's valuable to listen in on this. It's just going to be maybe a 10-minute thing here. Because there's probably people in your life that fall into this category, and maybe this will help you understand them better. So, like even with relationships, so even in my marriage, I feel like I need permission to speak, which sounds kind of funny, but I'm generally not somebody who's just going to come out and say, "Hey, here's what happened to me today. Here's what happened at work. Here's the latest insight that I have." I really am not wired that way, even though inside I really do want to share that. Like I have ideas, I have things I'm thinking about, I have experiences, and I want to share that. But I feel like I need permission to speak. I need somebody to ask me a question. And that's been kind of an interesting part of our relationship with my wife and with our kids is that really I'm the only question asker in the family. And so what happens is like I might go to Rwanda. Like I go to Rwanda, I've been there 4 times. I might go there for 2 weeks, come home, and never really talk about it because I don't just say, hey, here's all the experiences I have. I feel like I need people to be interested in it and they need to ask questions to prove their interest to me somehow. And so we kind of have this thing like people are like, well, if you want to talk about it, just talk about it. If you have something to share, just share. But I need people to ask me questions because somehow that validates that what I have to say is interesting or it's really something they want to hear versus me just sort of rambling on and people don't want to hear. And I think part of this lies in the fact that I might be ultra sensitive to people who just ramble on and on. I've had people in my life that have done this and they just ramble on and like they're not picking up on the cues that I don't care. I'm not interested. I'm not acknowledging this or anything. There's no you're just talking and nobody cares. And so I think part of this is that I am kind of deeply sensitive to that and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that just rambles on. So I want people to ask me a question. So if they say, hey, how was Rwanda? And I say, it was good. It was super interesting. We learned a lot. I think we're having a lot of impact. So yeah, it was really good. And if they don't ask another question, I'm not going to get into all the details, even though I could talk for 10 hours. And it's the same thing with my work and everything else. And so there's something ingrained in me that feels like I need the permission to talk. And I think this has been actually something that has hurt relationships in the past. Because if you really have a relationship of equals, you're both just sharing. Hey, here was my day. Here is my day. Here's what's happening at work. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I think about the kids. Here's my experience, whatever, playing poker or whatever it might be. And I think I'm just not that way. I need to be asked questions. And so it creates this sort of friction and puts some pressure on the people that I'm in relationship with because they feel like they're interested. They care about me, but they're not going to sit there and ask a million questions. They just assume if I have something to say, I'll just say it. And so I'm curious if any of you guys struggle with that at all. But this insight sort of came. So throw in the chat if that's something you struggle with or not. Say, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's fine. But let me know kind of what your thoughts are on this. But the revelation kind of came, like I said, I used to think it was just because I was introverted and shy. But if you know me at all, I'm not really shy. I just need permission to talk. And I didn't even realize that setting up this Facebook Live sort of did that. My buddy Stacy said, it's sort of ironic that you're setting up a time to give yourself a platform to speak, to talk about the inability that you have to just speak without a platform. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But um, it sort of came to a revelation as I think, well, I do like to talk. I like to speak. I've done over 600 episodes of podcasting, a bunch of them with Pete Trulene, who's on here, the old Pete and Steve show, and Rec Poker, and Spiritual Threads, and Just Steve, and the Small Business Podcast. I've done a bunch of podcasts, episodes where I talk. I've done about 150 speaking engagements where I talk. I used to be in theater where I talk and had the presence, but I feel like all of those are really, I had permission to speak. Like either I created a platform for myself to speak, or somebody gave me a platform and said, okay, here, now is the opportunity for you to speak. And so I think that's really an interesting dynamic that I struggle with, and it really does get in the way. And so I'm just kind of reading through the comments. Pete, totally, Amor, thank you. Can empathize that as well. I think that it's so interesting that we struggle with that. I think a lot of us speakers do, because I know a lot of people that are professional speakers that they say, you know what, I speak and then I just want to leave. Like I don't want to talk to people, and I don't know. Some of that is just because they're shy or they're exhausted. But I do think some people kind of struggle with that with me. Like now I just have to go and listen to people talk, and I don't want to be told, that it was really good. I just want to do my platform talk and then go. That's sort of all I wanted to share is just sort of that. Is that this idea of some of us need to be given the platform to speak. So now I kind of want to hear your questions and hear your thoughts on this thing too. I just thought it was an interesting insight that it might help other people, that maybe your unwillingness to just share unsolicited is not so much introversion as much as it is you just need to be given permission to speak. And I don't know what causes that. Again, I think part of that is was I raised not to speak unless spoken to? I don't think so. I think my mom might be on here, and I don't think that was ever the case. But I did have exposure to people that really would just talk. And this is when I was younger, but this is also when I was older, where it's just like, seriously, stop talking. You're not interesting, or at least let me give my thoughts, or let's get some feedback, or read the social cues or something. And so I think I developed sort of a hypersensitivity to people that just talked. And I just don't want to be that guy. So I think that is part of it. I do think Amor and others that are on here, I think I do struggle a little bit with just feeling like, is what I'm doing interesting? Like, I think it is. Like my job, I was an actuary. It's pretty boring unless you're in it. If you're an actuary, it's pretty exciting, but if you're not, it's kind of boring. And I think, my Rwanda stuff, like I think that's amazingly interesting, right? But if people aren't asking questions, then it must not be interesting to them. And so when I do share with people, a lot of what I do is I'll just kind of tease it out. I'll give a sentence or two response to kind of a big question. And then I try to feel out, are they interested in what I'm talking about or not? And so I try to get a feeling there, which maybe isn't fair, but I also do this way too much. And I've gotten this feedback where I'll just say, I was at work and I was working on a problem and blah, blah, blah. Or, I went to Rwanda, man, we opened up a clean water project. It was super awesome and blah, blah, blah. And so I say those kinds of things. And I don't know, you guys give me some insight on this. I don't know what the issue there is. If it's because I'm concerned that it's not interesting, if it's, I want to get a social cue from somebody to say, no, don't blah, blah, blah that. Tell me more about that. But I think ultimately what I'm doing is I'm kind of putting these unrealistic expectations on people that I'm in relationship with, that I'm having conversations with. Like all of a sudden, like I know for my wife, like there's all this pressure on her to ask me the right question. Like, because I'm not going to talk about things unless she asks me a question. And she's not naturally inquisitive, but she's very interested in my life. Like she cares about me. She wants me to share my stuff, but she doesn't really know what question to ask. And so we have this sort of weird back and forth where I need her to ask questions. She's not asking questions, so I don't really talk about it. So I think she's not interested, but she says she's interested. And the kind of the wheels on the bus go round and round kind of thing. And we kind of twist ourselves into some issues there. so I did talk more when I was young, my mom says. So Ellen Lance is my mom. She says I talked more when I was young. I don't know. I don't know what that is. If I went through a period in high school or college or whatever, being a parent, um, I feel like I talk plenty, but now I need to be given a platform. Like somebody needs to say it's okay for you to talk. Like if I'm just with a group of four friends, say, I'm not just going to talk about, even if I just was in Rwanda, I'm not really going to talk about that unless they ask questions, unless they say, all right, you have the platform. And we actually did this with a group of friends where I don't remember whose idea it was. It might have even been mine. I just kind of wanted each of us to tell our story, like our story of our upbringing or the last 10 years or whatever it is. I just want to hear the story of people. And we actually agreed to meet 4 consecutive weeks. And each week it was somebody's turn. And when it was my turn, I shared a lot. I shared more fully than I ever would have shared in just the regular conversation of the group because I felt like, okay, I've been given a platform. And I think this is why I create things like podcasts. Part of it is I think there's some interesting things that need to be talked about, but I want to have an opportunity to share with people. And so we create a platform of a podcast, or I do a speaking gig, or I'm in theater, or I do strategic planning where I'm the facilitator. These things are where I feel like, okay, Steve, you have the platform. You are the expert, or you are the person in charge. Go talk. And I'm very comfortable in that role. But I won't take over that role. I won't assume that role. I won't grab hold of that role unless somebody says it's yours. And so I don't know. The reason I bring this up is I feel like it's somehow limiting me in certain situations, in those things. And Alberto says CIA agents are always interesting. Yeah, thanks, Alberto. He is making reference to the practical joke that I played on my daughter, where I convinced her that I was working for the CIA or the FBI. And it's tough because she's pretty skeptical. But I was able to convince her ultimately that I worked for the FBI, and I had to hide like packets of like Russian intelligence around the house and taped underneath things in the basement, hidden in some stuff from Rwanda. And so it was a pretty fun moment. Thank you, Alberto, for calling that out. Um, Pete says it seems like some people assume others will be interested in what they say, and some people won't. Some people assume people won't be interested. Maybe that is the linchpin, Pete. This is why you and I need to get back together, man. You keep dropping wisdom. I think that's true. I think my wife Tracy, who Pete, she always presumes welcome. Like she just assumes people want to hear what she has to say. She assumes people enjoy her being there and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's incredibly beautiful. To just assume, hey, people are going to be very gracious, and they're going to assume, and other people assume they won't be interested unless they tell you otherwise, and that's the camp that I fall in. And so maybe I don't know. Do you think that has something to do with my interest level in people? Maybe because maybe that's it. Maybe because I'm not always interested in what people have to say, I assume they're not interested in what I have to say. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe that's what the whole thing is, right? Maybe it's you assume people are thinking the same way you're thinking. It's like a Fulton poker strategy. Is you assume people are acting the same way that you're acting. Like why would they ever do that there? I would never do that there. Maybe that's the situation, Pete. Maybe because I'm not always interested in what people have to say, so I assume they're not interested in what I have to say. Ooh, that one hurts a little bit, but that might be true. All right, Amor. Let's see what you drop some wisdom on me, Amor. She's a former HR executive, so she must have something great to say. She says, "Why don't you try a different way of engaging with others and contributing something you think is interesting that's linked to whatever's being discussed? Don't assume others will not find it interesting." Yeah, I think that's it, Amor. I mean, I do think that's it. I think I have the ability to take the context of the conversation and then add something, but help me out here because I feel like if we're a group of four people, right, and the three of them are just talking, they're having a great time, and I'm not disinterested. I'm just kind of there. Like I really don't have anything to add. I think they would love it if I jumped in and said, "Hey, this reminds me of this," but I just feel like, why do I need to? Like, so it's either why do I need to, or for whatever reason, I need them to say, "Steve, what do you think?" Like if they say, "Steve, what do you think?" Man, I'm all over that thing, and I've got all kinds of thoughts, but I don't just volunteer those things. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm afraid of interrupting, or if I don't know that it's that interesting. But that is a restriction on me. And so then what happens is you think, well, that's fine. Then, boy, you just got off the hook easy. You went through this 2 hour night with 4 people and you didn't have to say a word. So for an introvert, you're very excited. But then I feel bad on the end of it, right? Like I feel like, well, nobody even cared what I thought. I didn't even contribute. And I know it's totally my fault. Like, so logically, this whole thing breaks down. I know it's my fault, but I still feel bad that I was never really part of the conversation. So what's wrong with me? Help me, people. Mom, you put others first. That's very generous of you. Sensitive if others are not interested. People are interested once we get you sharing. I think that's right. I do think I have some interesting things. I've had a pretty eclectic, interesting life with a lot of cool experiences, and I love sharing those things. And I don't think I'm super long-winded. But yeah, so once I get started, I think it's okay. But it's that initial permission to feel like I can talk. And sometimes I just kind of give up, like, they're good, they got this. So anyway, this went longer than I thought, but I just wanted to share some of these thoughts because I think there are more people like me than we realize, and maybe you folks in the chat are some of them, maybe you're not. But I think this idea of needing permission to speak is something that some of us struggle with, and I'd like to figure out why that is. And is it just something I just need to understand, or is there actually some way to improve relationships if I can kind of get to the bottom of that? Oh, Lynn, fantastic, a great connection that I made a while ago. She says, what about doing some pre-speaking research or a survey to find out what your audience wants to hear? Then you can tailor your talk in a way that you know will be interesting to your audience. Yeah, and I think that's a good advice for any speaking gig. And I think the speaking gigs I don't really struggle with as much, Lynn. I think it's more the personal interaction, like a speaking gig where somebody says, hey, we want you to speak to our audience. Sweet, man. I've got the platform. I can go. I can come up with that. I think I need to improve my speaking skills, but that's no problem for me. It's those places where I'm not actually given a platform, where I'm very reluctant to take it, or very reluctant to share, or very reluctant to engage, for fear that people won't find me interesting, or for fear that it'll disrupt the great conversation that they have, or that they really don't care what I have to say. And so I think those are the situations where if I don't feel like I'm specifically given permission to speak, I don't. And I think some people might say, well, sweet, but I think it does hamper relationships and connections and even networking in the business world. So thank you, Amor, for that encouragement. I do try to share when I can, but again, people have to say, hey, Steve, what do you think? So anyway, so I need to kind of move past that a little bit, but I wanted to share that deal in hopes that maybe that helps somebody. Maybe somebody says, that connects with me. I get it. But just know it's something that I do struggle with. I'm going to try to get better. You guys can encourage me. I don't know how you can do that, but just say, hey, what do you think once in a while? And maybe I'll jump in there. But thanks for watching the Facebook Live. Here we go. Amor, part of living fearlessly is not asking for permission to share. I know, Amor. You're so good at that. Help me out. Help me out. Maybe during the mastermind, you guys can help me out there, live more fearlessly in that. And Diane, it's called small talk. You're better than you think. Thank you, Diane. I appreciate that. I feel like I can make small talk if I feel like people actually are sort of inviting me with either body language or words into sharing what I think. But sometimes I'm just like, they don't seem to care. I don't care. As an introvert, I'm very comfortable sitting back. All right, good stuff. Well, thank you, Alberto. I appreciate that. I think I'm respectful, but I think that's all fine and well. But I think if I'm going to feel bad at the end of the day, then something's wrong, right? Like if I'm respectful of people, and I am interested in people, so I ask a ton of questions. I ask a lot of questions. But then at the end of the day, if all they did was talk about themselves and never asked about me, that seems respectful, and it is, but then I feel bad afterward, and I even start to resent those people because they never showed interest in me. And so I need to figure out a way to reconcile that, to either be okay just having them talk and me never talking, or make sure that my voice is heard so that I feel like it's a mutually beneficial thing, because not everybody is going to reciprocate and ask me questions back. I've learned that. I always think, I'm somebody who has a million questions. That's why I love doing podcasts, because I'm so interested in humans. And I have a million questions. And so when I ask people, what questions do you have? And they never have any questions. I'm always shocked by that. And so I have to learn to reconcile that in my world, that not everybody has as many questions as I have. Not everybody's they might be just as curious, but they don't have questions. They don't formulate it. So I've got to figure that deal out. Anyway, I'll let you guys go. If there's any topics, I do want to sort of go back and forth on these Thursday Facebook Live. Some of them I'm going to talk a bit about community building, the different process of how do you build community, how do you create a community mindset for yourself, which is moving past the individual I into the collective we. How do you incorporate community into building small business, into your hobbies, into your friendships? Because what I found is those same principles are huge for building organizations and building fulfillment in our life. So I'm going to mix in some of that stuff, but I also just want to talk real talk. I want to get to know you guys, the folks that are connecting with me out here on social media. So if you have any questions, you want me to share anything, if you have any insights that you'd like me to kind of probe into, happy to do that. But I am planning on doing these on the Steve Fredlund Facebook page where you're at right now, every Thursday, 3 p.m. Central. And we'll just kind of go from there and see what happens. But thanks for jumping on here, you guys. Sorry it got a bit longer. I thought it'd be 5-10 minutes. Here we are at 20 minutes. But y'all got me going with your questions. And I have a platform to speak, and nobody's stopping me. Nobody's interrupting me. Nobody's taking the microphone. So then I just rambled. But we will chat with you guys next week. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or insights that could help me out. Click me a link. Send me a link to a resource. Help me figure this thing out. But oh, Pete had one more thing. All right. Oh, he's an Enneagram guy, so I got to comment on this. See, I love this conversation. Pete, 4s, 5s, and 9s. He's referring to the Enneagram there. I'm a 5 on the Enneagram, for those of you who know that, are in the withdrawn triad, 100%. The other triads are assertive and compliant. Yeah, Tracy's an 8. So if you know that, Pete, so Tracy's an 8, an assertive triad. I'm in the withdrawn triad. It always comes back to the Enneagram. It's so true, Pete. Like, it's so true. We've used the Enneagram as a great way to try to understand each other, because that is my thing. I tend to withdraw, right? And one of the other things, this I'll just keep going. I don't care. I was told from my social media expert to keep it short, but one of the other things that I didn't even touch on with this is that as a 5 on the Enneagram, one of the things, hey Rob, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you can relate. I'm sorry you can relate, but I'm glad you can relate. But one of the things with a 5 is that I get my emotions wrapped up in what I say, in my thoughts, in what I share. So when I share something, it's not just sharing intellectually or from my past experience. I actually have emotional attachment to that. Like, I won't share something unless I've kind of thought it through and I'm kind of emotionally attached to it. So, like, for example, like, I'm not just gonna say, hey, should we go to a movie? If I say, hey, should we go to a movie? I've actually thought, hey, this would be really fun. I've got a mental picture of what it would look like to go to a movie. And then so when somebody says no, I feel like somehow emotionally let down or emotionally disappointed. And so even those benign things like that have a risk. So me even saying things like that, me volunteering things like that, are sort of a vulnerability for me. There's sort of a risk for me. So in the context of a group conversation, if everybody's chatting, and I bring up some topic of conversation, or I say, hey, this happened to me in Rwanda, or this happened in the business, or this happened at work, or this happened when I was out walking, I usually have an emotional attachment to that. And so if I don't get the appropriate response to that, I get emotionally hurt. And I mean, I do not want to live like that. And I don't want to put that pressure on the people in my lives either. Like, right? Like, now if I say, hey guys, that reminds me of a time that I went to Rwanda and they had this mushroom project. And I tell you what, we taught them how to grow mushrooms, and that became a source of improving their immune system and their health, but also became a great place for them to make some money and actually improve their life. And if the response is just sort of, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, if that's it, I have just put out, like, my heart is so full of the mushroom project. And if I put that out there and I get a tepid response, I get emotionally hurt. I'm not blaming the people, but I get emotionally hurt. And so I think part of that, Rob's nodding his head. And so I think part of that is, why would I put that out there? It's too much risk. It's too risky to put that out there. But if I have a gathering that I put together, I do these once in a while, or I have a gathering and say, let's talk about the impact in Rwanda. I know people are going to be there that are interested. They've come there to hear me talk about that. I think that's safer than for me to talk about the mushroom project. And so I think what happens is, over time, I just get beat down, and I'm like, why would I even say anything? Like, why would I bring that up? Like, why would I even add to the conversation? I'm just going to get hurt. And so then the withdrawn thing, like Pete was talking about, just sort of kicks into high gear. And I'm like, and everybody's like, are you okay? You're not really saying much. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. And part of it is, you don't need me to talk. Part of it is nobody's really asking me any questions, but part of it is that risk of what if I do add to the conversation and they don't react well enough, right? Now I feel even worse. So I'm kind of just stuck not talking. So that's why I need platforms like this to talk, because it's the only time I feel like I can be honest, I can be transparent. You guys, nobody's there actually criticizing me, and once in a while Rob nods his head in the chat. So that's part of this whole thing fits in there. So a more opposites can complement each other and enable each other to grow as individuals and together as a couple. 100%. Like I tell you, the best thing for me has been having Tracy in my life. We've been married almost 30 years. Uh, but we think very differently, and I think it's a challenge for both of us, especially in the early years, right, where we're trying to figure things out. But I tell you, it's a huge. My personality is even better now than it was back then, even though I still struggle. So it's a good thing. But I agree, it's a compliment, but we have to be intentional about looking for those things. All right, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for jumping in the chat. That was super fun. I loved having the engagement. I'll be here every Thursday, 3 o'clock. I'll try to put it out there in advance what the topic is. So if it's interesting to you, you can join here as well. And feel free to share this thing. Let's keep the conversation going. But I do appreciate that, guys. I will sign off and we will chat later. Thanks so much.